Yeah, go ahead.
During the first few days of the ceasefire, of the beginning of the ceasefire, the rebels had carried out over 300 ceasefire violations while the Syrian army actually stopped the strikes. Those were the first few days. Syria's second largest rebel group, al-Sham, just came out and right away refused to abide by that ceasefire. And this was before the U.S. bombed the Syrian military, admittedly by mistake. And then the humanitarian convoy was hit, which the U.S. blamed on Russia, and Russia vehemently denied having done that. Looking at the events that followed the ceasefire, how is it fair to say that Russia is solely responsible for the failure of this deal?
Because, and we've said this many, many times, they have influence on Assad. I didn't make that up.
Are you saying that you don't have influence with the rebels?
We do, and so do some of our allies and partners as well. And we've also been honest about the fact that the opposition hasn't, in every case and in every situation, on every day, met their obligations under that ceasefire arrangement. We've been honest about that. The difference is the Russians aren't being honest about what's going on and about the degree to which they are supporting Assad and assisting him in this continued siege of Aleppo. I didn't make it up that they have influence over Assad. They're the ones who have asserted that they have influence over Assad. They're the ones with a long security and defense relationship. They're the ones with a base in Syria. We don't have a base in Syria. So it's been pretty clear since the beginning of this that of all other nations, Russia has the most influence on Assad. And one of the reasons we know that is because back in February, when the cessation actually was first announced, for about 6 to 8 weeks, we did see a significant reduction in violence, something to the tune, depending on your estimates, of, let me finish, 70 to 80%. And that was because we saw Russia use that influence on Assad to a greater good, which they have not only not proven willing to do in the last week to 10 days, actually actively assisted him to the contrary.
And if the U.S. does have influence with these rebel groups, why the hundreds of ceasefire violations? Why did that happen?
We have influence over some, not all. We have
the second largest rebel group just refused to abide by that deal.
There are other nations that have influence, and again, we have admitted that not all the opposition groups on every single day completely abided by it, and we continue to work with them to that end.
Can you admit that part of the responsibility for the failure of this deal lies with the rebels and with the U.S. for not being able to separate the rebels from al-Nusrah, specifically in Aleppo, and for not getting everybody to abide by this ceasefire?
I think we've been nothing but honest about the fact that there have been violations of the ceasefire and the cessation of hostilities on all sides. The Secretary has said that I don't know how many times. So I don't know that how. I'm not going to be sure. I'm not sure that anything I can say today is going to expand on that.
Responsible for the deterioration of the situation. Is that fair?
What I said was they're responsible for this situation, the one we're talking about here, in terms of continued attacks on civilian infrastructure, hospitals, and innocent civilians in and around Aleppo, the siege of Aleppo.
But they say that, John, they do say that they're going after Nusrah and terrorists, and you say to that.
That's not what's happening. That's what we say to that. They're hitting hospitals. They're hitting civilian infrastructure. They're hitting the headquarters of the White Helmets. Now, so what we're seeing them hit is not Nusrah. And where we're seeing them bomb is not where we know Nusrah to be. And this has been a pretense that Moscow and Damascus has been proffering now for many months. Well, you're going to go after terrorists. Fine, you want to go after terrorists. If you're going to do what you say you do, then show that you're going after terrorists. And they haven't done that. There have been times when they have, but they have also, under the pretense of going after terrorist groups, presumably al-Nusrah, they have hit what are clearly civilian targets.
So you think they're trying to take Aleppo?
I think you can only conclude from the military activity that we've seen that the siege of Aleppo persists, and it's
eastern Aleppo, part of Aleppo, because larger Aleppo is not under siege.
All you can conclude from what we continue to see on the ground is that that the regime wants to take Aleppo back.
Is the administration committed to making sure that eastern Aleppo or this particular area of Aleppo does not fall into regime/Russian hands?
Obviously, we don't want to see the regime
I know you don't.
acquire any additional territory as laid out in the cessation of hostilities agreement. I'm not going to speculate about actions, decisions, consequences down the road.
But down the road, I mean, by some estimates, it could fall in like the next 5 days.
The Secretary was clear this morning in his phone call with Foreign Minister Lavrov about the sense of urgency that we have here on the United States side with respect to what we need to see them do.
The U.S. has expressed grave concern over what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen by hitting civilian targets there. Why isn't the U.S. threatening to cut ties with Saudi Arabia?
We have the Secretary talked about this when we were in Jeddah a few weeks ago. We have been honest with the Saudis about our concerns over the lack of precision in some strikes, and we've talked to them about the importance of conducting investigations into those strikes, and we know that that they continue to do that, to investigate. But
that's far from threatening to cut ties.
It
Congress
is a,
just approved the sale of $1 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia.
That's right, because we have a strong defense relationship with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is under attack from
hospitals, schools in Yemen.
Saudi Arabia is under attack from missiles that are finding their way into Yemen with the help of Iran, that are raining down on Saudi citizens, and they have a right to defend themselves. Now, I have stood up here, I don't know how many times, and talked about our concerns about the precision or lack thereof in some of these strikes, and our concerns about that, and the Saudis have taken our concerns seriously. It's a different situation, and I think comparing what's happening in Yemen to Syria is a ludicrous exercise.
But Saudi Arabia is doing there what Russia is accused of doing in Syria. So
No.
How is that consistent?
Because what we're seeing the Russians do, and I would love to see you ask your government some of these questions. You know, Russia today never does that. You never poke and prod your own government.
Go on
But
you attack me when you want to evade a question.
No, I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking you. I'm not attacking you. I would just love to see your institution ask these same kind of questions of your own government. Your government, which is flying aircraft over Aleppo and bombing hospitals. And it's not imprecision. It's specifically targeting civilian infrastructure and innocent people, innocent women and children, and first responders that are trying to come to the rescue after these strikes occur. I mean, that's deliberate. That's measured. That is absolutely in violation of international law. We're not talking about civilian casualties that are caused, by an inefficiency in the targeting process. We're talking about, in Aleppo specifically, an effort to take that city down and to acquire it in violation of the cessation of hostilities, which was agreed on by Russia, oh, by the way, in February.
I am here asking you what I think are fair questions, and I have one more. If you can just...
I'll give you one more.
Attacks, yes. Put attacks aside
I'm not
and just try to
I'm not
respond to
attacking.
questions.
I just am curious.
You are. We are learning that Syrian rebels have received, quote-unquote, excellent quantities of surface-to-surface Grad missiles from, quote-unquote, foreign states. Actually, this is from a Reuters article. I was quoting a Reuters article. Considering how intertwined some of these rebel groups are with al-Nusrah, specifically in Aleppo, how long do you think before these powerful weapons end up in the hands of terrorists?
I couldn't possibly begin to answer that question. I can't confirm the veracity of that press reporting. And I'm not going to engage in speculation on a press report I can't speak to.
Do you have any information about rebels receiving
Is delivering man-pads to the opposition is one of the options that the agencies are
Guys,
discussing?
I've talked about the fact that I'm not going to discuss in any greater detail interagency discussions about this.
Because news reports talked about this yesterday and today, saying that the U.S. is not opposing anymore, providing the opposition with this kind of arms.
I've addressed this issue as much as I'm going to do today.
Can we move on?
Yeah.